Today we recap 2024 movie by the name, Rebel Moon, Part 2, The Scargiver, a Zack Snyder's space adventure thriller. When the ferocious Imperium army conquered the little planet of Velt and requested to be handed massive supplies of grain, the franchise opened with Cora, a former soldier of the Imperium, sheltering there. After receiving the supplies, Cora understood that the Imperium would undoubtedly continue, so she set out to assemble an army of fighters to combat the evil that was approaching them from across the galaxy. Since Regent Belisarius, the primary enemy, also happens to be Cora's adoptive father, she and the others had to deal with treachery at this period. The epic fight on the planet Velt is shown in Rebel Moon Part 2, as Cora carries on her mission to kill the resurrected Atticus Noble. The Scargiver opens on King's Gaze, the powerful, cutting-edge warship owned by Atticus Noble, one of the best admirals in the Imperium. While the last movie, A Child of Fire, showed the main character, Cora, killing Noble in combat and guaranteeing his demise, it also had a teaser showing the Admiral's body having been found and undergoing some unexplained testing. With the exception of a little scar on his chest, Atticus Noble is brought back to life thanks to the new movie, which verifies that he possesses non-human components. Noble begins looking for Cora, the person who gave him the scar, since he wants to keep it there as a reminder of the battle he would soon have to face. In the meantime, the valiant warriors return to Velt bearing the happy news that they have driven out the Imperium army from this region of the galaxy, guaranteeing the village's safety from any more assaults. Cora tells the amiable villagers that peace has finally arrived in Velt since she is certain that she has murdered Noble. While Aris continues to pretend that he is a member of the Imperium army whenever the authorities get in touch with him, Hagen and Den greet the warriors and assist them in making Velt their home. Aris is the first to learn that the King's Gaze would be arriving in Velt in 3 days since he was left by the army to serve as their envoy in the village. Cassius, Noble's aide, only says that the ship would be arriving in the hamlet to retrieve the grains as previously agreed upon, without providing any information regarding his general's resurrection. Ultimately, Cassius and Noble have started to suspect that Aris is no longer on their side. Everyone, including the warriors, is taken aback by the news that the spacecraft is making its way toward the hamlet. Because it is not normal for a starship to travel to a location in this reality without its captain present. That is, until Atticus Noble, the commander of King's Gaze, is killed, the situation begins to look fishy. On the other hand, the villagers, led by Titus, begin preparing for the visit by gathering the whole crop and getting ready to defend their house against the impending Imperium onslaught. With the aid of the mercenary Kai, who had posed as an ally, Atticus Noble and his fleet attacked Cora and her group of fighters in Rebel Moon Part 1. When Cora finally had her opportunity to face Noble face to face, she used a strong stab to defeat him and cause his body to tumble to a lower platform. It was evident that Noble's men were preparing for this kind of thing when a spacecraft from the Imperium army crew was already spotted gathering the body and returning it to his spaceship. While The Scargiver, the sequel, doesn't really reveal anything new on the methods of healing employed on Noble, we may still make some educated guesses as to how he was brought back to life. Due to the fact that Atticus Noble was never fully human and has always had certain mechanical robotic components inside of him, he occasionally needed cords and outside energy to power himself. His body was saved and identical cables were placed all over his back and chest in an attempt to resurrect him after he was vanquished and appeared to have died. The procedure was carried out so quickly that it was clear Noble's crew on his starship was ready for any eventuality, even the possibility that their admiral may be wounded in combat and require resuscitation. For this reason, groups of medical professionals and experts tested the method and were always on board to do the surgery. Currently, General Cassius is in command of the resurrection plan, which has also been predetermined, as Cassius was in charge of the starship following Noble's downfall. Noble eventually feels well enough to resume his activities, but the technicians have not given him the all-clear. When it is explained to him that he must follow certain procedures and guidelines before being permitted to rejoin the Imperium, he becomes irate and Cassius must intervene. Since Atticus Noble is portrayed as the ultimate monster and without any other human qualities, it goes without saying that he murders the chief technician who stands in his way of rising to the position of admiral once more. Cassius also finds this needless slaughter to be acceptable. Very shortly, Atticus Noble fully resurrects and returns to his previous persona as the wicked admiral in the Scargiver's scheme. When Cora discussed the events from her history in A Youngster of Fire, she disclosed that her family had perished in an Imperium army raid on her planet when she was a youngster. After adopting Cora as an orphan and training her to be a brutal regime soldier, Belisarius selected her to serve as the royal family's bodyguard. But when a group of assassins made a major attack, Cora was unable to save the king, queen, and young princess, and the royal family was murdered. Following this occurrence, Cora crashed into the settlement in Velt. The people helped save her, and she managed to stay concealed there with their assistance. The heroine appeared to be hiding out of guilt and humiliation for leaving her position as an Imperium soldier, but the reality is far different. Now, in the Scargiver, Cora tells her partner Gunnar the whole truth about the horrific events in her past. Though Belisarius had mentored Cora and helped her become a skilled soldier, he had a completely different, and somewhat nasty, plan for her. Being a strong senator, Belisarius had long harbored ambitions to take over the Motherworld, and his determination was increased by the former king's shift of perspective. Despite having led several invasions of worlds on behalf of the Imperium, the king eventually began to regret these deeds following the birth of Princess Issa, who healed everyone and everything in her path. A source of embarrassment for Belisarius, the king intended to demolish a spacecraft that had been utilized by the army in several invasions as a direct result of this shift. The spacecraft was an engineering wonder and a source of tremendous pride for the Motherworld, having been built with amazing accuracy. Since the loss of this icon constituted an atrocity, Belisarius felt that it was now necessary to finally call the king to task. On the day of the formal demolition, Belisarius arranged a sabotage against the royal family after winning the trust of a few army personnel. Having trapped the king, queen, and princess within a chamber manned by troops, Belisarius carried out his treachery by initiating the attack. After he killed the king with a knife, Cora took it upon herself to dispose of Princess Issa after the queen was also dead. Cora had previously been assigned similar duty, and even though she knew that killing an innocent girl would be required, she was unable to refuse the command since, like her father, she still held Belisarius in high regard. Having run out of options, Cora used her laser rifle to kill Issa and carried out the sabotage scheme. After he killed the king with a knife, Cora took it upon herself to dispose of Princess Issa after the queen was also dead. Cora had previously been assigned similar duty, and even though she knew that killing an innocent girl would be required, she was unable to refuse the command since, like her father, she still held Belisarius in high regard. Having run out of options, Cora used her laser rifle to kill Issa and carried out the sabotage scheme. Thus, immediately following Cora's murder of Issa, Belisarius gave the order for the troops to apprehend Cora and identify her as the assassin responsible for the royal family's deaths. When Cora saw that a massive treachery was being planned against her, she refused to go along with it and, after murdering several troops, she fled the chamber. She then succeeded in leaving the area on her starship and sought safety on Velt while concealing her true identity because she had been identified as the killer of Princess Issa and the assassin, whom she had earlier vowed to protect. Once more, the Scargiver features Jimmy, the armed robot who battled several Imperium soldiers after developing consciousness to save the Velt residents. Jimmy appeared to have become a villager and was seen with antlers at the conclusion of A Child of Fire. Jimmy, on the other hand, decides to live as a loner in the neighboring forest and does not reside in the settlement on Velt. After becoming sentient, Jimmy appears to be locked in a philosophical debate because he is unable to completely understand why he abandoned the people he was meant to serve. But when he encounters Cora as the town gets ready for the impending Imperium invasion, the robot admits that seeing her has drastically changed him. Jimmy became more charitable as a result of Cora's actions toward him and the ideals she propagated, which naturally made Jimmy hostile to the Imperium army. Although Jimmy's choice to shoot down the troops in the first movie may have been an act of impetuous solidarity, he now fully embraces the noble cause at the conclusion of Scargiver. Jimmy joins the villagers and fights the troops as the Imperium army and the villagers engage in combat. He is important in knocking down an artillery machine. The finale of Rebel Moon Part 2 features a ferocious fight on Velt, as the villagers are attempting to repel the invading army from their home with the assistance of the warriors. As the king's gaze begins to recede, Cora realizes she cannot allow this opportunity to eliminate the evil admiral pass her by. She and Gunnar snuck inside the king's gaze cruiser using her wrecked spacecraft, which was still functional, with the intention of blasting it to ruins. Cora wants to murder Atticus Noble once and for all, so she sneaks throughout the maze-like area searching for the Admiral in addition to blowing up the ship with bombs. By now, Noble had also given the order for his soldiers to launch an attack on the hamlet on Velt, which would murder all of the residents as well as any Imperium soldiers remaining on the ground and ruin the stored grains. The bombs Cora planted detonate as this attack is launched and the ship's cannons fire, sending the enormous King's gaze cruiser hurtling toward Earth. During this period, Cora confronts Atticus Noble and, with Gunnar's assistance, ultimately ends his life. In order to guarantee that the Admiral is indeed dead at the conclusion of the Scargiver and cannot be resurrected, Cora makes sure to decapitate Noble this time. However, Gunnar is also gravely injured by this, since he ultimately passes away before Cora can reach Velt. In addition to being given a new purpose for the future, Cora must continue to deal with the death of her beloved. Titus reveals at the conclusion of the Scargiver that Princess Issa is still alive due to her magical abilities and is not actually dead. This not only clears Cora of the murder she thought she had done, but it also signals that a sequel to the mediocre series will be released at some point.